Then fourth unit, data mining and cluster analysis. Then first of all, what is the cluster? Cluster is a group of objects that belong to the same class. In other words, similar objects are grouped in one cluster and dissimilar objects are grouped in another cluster. होता क्या है, क्लस्टर के बारे में जब हम बात करेंगे तो व्हाट इज द क्लस्टर एनालिसिस इन डेटा माइनिंग? क्या होता है क्लस्टर एनालिसिस? क्लस्टर एनालिसिस इन डेटा माइनिंग मीन दैट टू find out the group of objects which are similar to each other in the group but are different from the object in other groups. In the process of clustering in data analytics, the set of data are divided into group or classes based on the similarity. ये क्या होता है? क्लस्टर एनालिसिस होता है. मैं फिर से एक बार बता देता हूँ क्लस्टर एनालिसिस के बारे में. क्लस्टर एनालिसिस in data mining means that to find out the group of objects which are similar to each other in the group but are different from the object in other groups. In the process of clustering in data analytics, the sets of data are divided into groups or classes based on data similarities. जब हम डेटा एनालिसिस क्लस्टर के बारे में बात करते हैं तो एक चीज आता है, व्हाट इज क्लस्टर एनालिसिस एंड इट्स टाइप. क्या होता है क्लस्टर एनालिसिस और इसके टाइप कितने होते हैं? क्लस्टर एनालिसिस फाउंडेशन रिले ऑन one of the most fundamental, simple and very often unnoticed way or method of understanding and learning which a grouping object and into similar group. ये क्या होता है कि एक अंडरस्टैंडिंग होती है जो पर्टिकुलर किसी भी डेटा की, जो एक ग्रुप के रूप में, एक ऑब्जेक्ट के रूप में प्रोसेस को फॉलो करता है. दिस प्रोसेस इंक्लूड ए नंबर ऑफ डिफरेंट एल्गोरिथम एंड मेथड टू मेक क्लस्टर ऑफ ए सिमिलर काइंड. लाइक होता क्या है, सपोज हम पर्टिकुलर किसी भी ग्राफ के थ्रू इस तरीके से रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं किसी भी डेटा को, तो इसके अंदर ये 0 पॉइंट होता है, ये एक्स एक्सिस होता है, ये वाई एक्सिस होता है. इसके अंदर एक होता है ग्रुप ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट, ग्रुपिंग, ऑब्जेक्ट की ग्रुपिंग इस तरीके से. ये ऑब्जेक्ट की ग्रुपिंग होती है. दूसरा तरीका ये होता है इसके अंदर कि जब हम नॉर्मली सिमिलर ग्रुप्स, ये क्या ऑब्जेक्ट की एक ग्रुपिंग बनी है, इस तरीके के सिमिलर मल्टीपल ग्रुप्स बन जाते हैं. वो किस तरीके से बनते हैं? सपोज इस तरीके से एक ग्रुप ये बन गया, एक ग्रुप यहां बन जाएगा, एक ग्रुप यहां बन जाएगा. ठीक है, ये इन तीनों का क्या हो जाएगा? एक कॉम्बिनेशन. तो ये क्या हो गया? कलेक्शन ऑफ सिमिलर ग्रुप्स. क्या हो जाएगा? कलेक्शन ऑफ सिमिलर ग्रुप्स. इसमें दिस प्रोसेस इंक्लूड ए नंबर ऑफ डिफरेंट एल्गोरिथम एंड मेथड टू मेक क्लस्टर इन ए सिमिलर काइंड. ये होता है. एक होता है क्लस्टर एनालिसिस इज फॉर एग्जांपल यूज्ड टू आइडेंटिफाई ग्रुप ऑफ स्कूल्स और स्टूडेंट विथ सिमिलर प्रॉपर्टी. स्कूल और स्टूडेंट्स, इसमें क्लस्टर एनालिसिस के अंदर एक ये बेस्ट एग्जांपल होता है जो सिमिलर प्रॉपर्टीज होती हैं. फ्रॉम पूल डेटा प्रोजेक्ट्स सच एज those undertaken by the Penn Research Center use cluster analysis to discern topology of opinions, habits, and demography that may be useful in politics and marketing. What is cluster analysis used for? क्या cluster analysis का use होता है? Cluster analysis allow the organization to better understand the customer by identifying individual with the similar tailors, which can inform how the organization communicate with these customer. एक होता है what is cluster analysis and its the step. Step 1, confirm data is matrix. Step 2, scale the data. Step 3, select segmentation variable. Step 4, define similarity measure. Step 5, visualize pairwise distance. एक होता है व्हाट आर द थ्री टाइप ऑफ क्लस्टर. कौन से होते हैं? पहला होता है सेंट्रोइड बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग, डेंसिटी बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग, डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेशन बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग और हायरार्किकल क्लस्टरिंग. ये 3 क्लस्टरिंग होता है. 3 टाइप ऑफ क्लस्टर सिस्टम्स होते हैं. कौन कौन से होते हैं? एसिमेट्रिक क्लस्टरिंग सिस्टम, सिमेट्रिक क्लस्टरिंग सिस्टम और पैरेलल क्लस्टरिंग सिस्टम्स. कुछ क्लस्टरिंग के बेस्ट एग्जांपल्स होते हैं. एन एग्जांपल ऑफ मल्टीपल स्टेज सैम्पलिंग बाय द क्लस्टर. एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन intends to the survey to analyze the performance of smartphone across the Germany. And they can divide the entire country population into cities clusters and select cities with the highest population and also filter those using mobile devices. What are the advantage of cluster analysis? क्लस्टर एनालिसिस का एडवांटेज क्या होता है? क्लस्टर एनालिसिस कैन हेल्प यू गेन द इनसाइट एंड वैल्यू फ्रॉम योर डेटा बाय रिव्यूइंग पैटर्न एंड रिलेशनशिप दैट आर नॉट ऑब्वियस और inadequate. For example, you can use the cluster analysis to segment clusters based on their preference, behavior or characteristics to tailor marketing pictures and product strategy. What is the cluster analysis diagram? Cluster analysis is an exploratory technique that you can use to visualize the pattern in your project by grouping file or nodes that share similar words, similar attribute value or are coded similar by node. Where is cluster used? Some common application for the clustering include the following. One is the market segmentation, social network analysis, search result grouping, medical imaging, image segmentation और anomalies detections. Why is cluster used? क्यों cluster को हम use लेते हैं? Clustering is used to identify the group of similar objects in dataset with 2 or more variable quantitative in predictive. This data may be collected from the marketing, biomedical or geostry datasets among many other places. What is called cluster? Cluster को cluster क्यों बोलते हैं? Cluster are typically defined as collection or group of items with similar or different characteristics. The group or collection of items constitutes a cluster. What are the two main type of clusters? Clustering itself can be categorized into 2 types. एक होता है हर्ट्ज क्लस्टरिंग एंड एक सॉफ्ट क्लस्टरिंग. इन हर्ट्ज क्लस्टरिंग one data point can belong to one cluster only, but in soft clustering the output provided is a probability likelihood of a data point belong to each of the predefined number of clusters. What is clustering also called? Clustering, also called unsupervised learning, is the process of dividing a dataset into groups such that the members of each group are as similar as possible to one another and different groups are as dissimilar as possible from another. What are the 3 major steps in cluster analysis? The hierarchical clustering analysis following the basis of calculate the distance, link, cluster and choose a solution by selecting the right number of clusters. What are the four clusters? Four clusters कौन सा होता है? Average, reserved, self-centroid and role modules. What are the characteristics of cluster? Characteristics of clusters कौन सा होता है? Analog, competitive and result oriented. Confusion Asia, result driven, eco group working together over the individual goals. What is cluster size? Cluster size represents the smallest amount of the disk space that can be used to hold a file. When file size do not come out to an even multiple of the clustering size, additional space must be used to hold the file up to the next multiple of the cluster size. What is a good example of clustering? Identifying fake news. Fake news is not a new phenomena, but it is one that the becoming profile. Spam filtering, marketing and sales, classifying network traffic, identifying fraud or criminal activity, documentation analysis, fantastic football and sports. These all are clustering techniques. तो इसके अंदर क्लस्टरिंग के अंदर वही चीज होता है. क्लस्टरिंग इज ए ग्रुप ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट that belongs to the same class. In other words, similar data are grouped in one cluster and dissimilar objects are grouped in another clusters. Next, बात करते हैं व्हाट इज क्लस्टरिंग. क्लस्टरिंग होता क्या है, इसके बारे में हम बात करेंगे. तो clustering is the process of making a group of abstract objects into class of similar objects. Graph of similar objects. The clustering is the process of making a group of abstract objects into class of similar objects. 1. Point to remember. A cluster of data objects be treated as one group. While doing cluster analysis, we first partition the set of data into groups based on data similarity and then assign the label to the group. The main advantage of clustering over the classification is that it adaptable to change and help the single out useful features that this gus distinguish different groups. Then applications of cluster analysis. What is the applications of cluster analysis? Then first of all, hello, hello, बेटा माइक म्यूट कर लो. Applications of cluster analysis. Cluster analysis is broadly used in many applications such as market research, pattern recognition, data analysis, and image processing. Then after clustering can also help the marketers discover distinct group in their customer base, and they can characterize the customer group based on purchasing and patterns. In the field of biology, it can be used to drive plant and animal taxonomies, categorize gene with the similar functionalities, and gain insight into the structure inherent to the populations. Next, clustering also help in the identification of area of similar land used in the Earth observation database. It also help in the identification of group of hours in a city according to house type, value, and geographical locations. Clustering also help in the classifying document on the web for the information discovery. Clustering is also used in outlier detection application such as the detection of credit card fraud. As a data mining function, clustering analysis serves as a tool to gain insight into the dispersion of data to observe the characteristics of each cluster. Requirement of clustering in data mining. Then the following points through light on why clustering is required in data mining. 1. Scalability. Scalability. We need highly scalable clustering algorithm to deal with large database. Another, ability to deal with different kind of attributes. One is the algorithm should be capable to be applied on any kind of data such as the interval based, numerical data, categorical and binary data. दूसरा क्या होता है, डिस्कवरी ऑफ क्लस्टर विथ एट्रीब्यूट शेप. दूसरा होता है रिक्वायरमेंट में डिस्कवरी क्लस्टर, discovery of cluster with attribute shape. The clustering algorithm should be capable of detecting clusters of arbitrary shape. They should not be bounded to only distance measures that tend to find the spatial cluster of small size. High dimensionality. The clustering algorithm should not only be able to handle low dimensional data but also the high dimensional space. Ability to deal with noisy data. Database contains the noisy, missing or erroneous data. Some algorithms are sensitive to such data may lead to poor quality clusters. Interpredictability. The clustering result should be predictable, comprehensible, and usable. Clustering methods. Clustering method can be classified into the following categories. One is patterning method, hierarchical method, density based method, grid based method, module based method, constraint based methods. ये सारे का सारा होता है. इसमें सबसे पहले हम पार्टनिंग के बारे में बात करते हैं. पार्टनिंग मेथड के अंदर क्या होता है, किस तरीके से हम काम करते हैं. पार्टनिंग मेथड के अंदर सबसे पहले होता है व्हाट आर द पार्टनिंग मेथड इन डेटा माइनिंग. पार्टनिंग मेथड इन डेटा माइनिंग इज ए पॉपुलर family of clustering algorithm that partition a dataset into k distinct clusters. These algorithms aim to group similar data points together while maximizing the difference between the clusters. दूसरी बात हम बात करेंगे हम why is partning method. Why is partning method? Partning is the process of dividing an input data set into multiple segments or partitions. Each processing node in your system then performs an operation on an individual pattern of the data set rather than on the entire data set. What are example of partning method? Partning is used to make solving method problem involving large number easier to separating them into smaller units. For example, 782 can be partitioned into 700 plus 80 plus 2. It helps the kind like 782, तो इसको अगर डिवाइड करना तो कैसे करेंगे 700 प्लस 80 प्लस 2, तो ये क्या होगा 782. तो ये क्या पार्टनिंग मेथड के अंदर आता है. It helps the kind see the true value of each digit rather than seeing 782 is an interdimensional number. They will see it as 780 and 2. What is partning and its type? Memory partitioning is as the system by which the memory of a computer system is divided into sections for use by the resident program. These memory divisions are known as partitions. There are different ways in which memory can be partitioned: fixed, variable, dynamic partitions. What are the three level of partitioning? कौन सा होता है रेंज पार्टिंग. दिस टाइप ऑफ पार्टिंग assign row partition based on the column value falling within a given range. एक था लिस्ट पार्टिंग, एक था हैश पार्टीशन, the key parting. What are the two partition method? Parting method, range parting provide to partition based on range of partition expansion value. If the range column parting is similar to range parting but enable you to define the partition using the range based on the multiple column and values. What are the two type of partition? एक होता है रेंज, एक होता है लिस्ट, एक होता है हैश और की. टू फॉर्मेट कौन कौन से होते हैं? एक तो प्राइमरी पार्टीशन, एक होता है एक्सटेंडेड पार्टीशन. पार्टनिंग मेथड्स क्या होते हैं? यूजिंग द पार्टनिंग इन मैथमेटिक्स मेक्स मैथ प्रॉब्लम easier as it helps you break down large number into smaller units. We can also partition complex shape to form similar shape that help make the calculations easier. How many partition type are these? There are two main type of the partition table, MBR and GPT. MBR stands for Master Boot Record and is a bit of reserved space at the beginning of the drive that contains the information about how the partitions are organized. What is horizontal and vertical partitions? Vertical partitioning store table or column in a separate database or table. Horizontal partition shading store row of a table in multiple database cluster. Shading makes it easy to generalize our data and allow for clustering computing. What are the four partitions? The default partition layout of UEFI based PC is a system partition as MSR, window partition and recovery tool पार्टीशंस, ये सारे के सारे पार्टीशंस होते हैं। अब पार्टीशंस के अंदर होता क्या है वो चीज़ देखते हैं। सपोज वी आर गिवन ए डेटाबेस ऑफ एन ऑब्जेक्ट एंड द पार्टनिंग। हेलो बेटा, बेटा माइक म्यूट कर लो।
ये गाड़ी बंद कैसे हो रही है? एक गाड़ी दो गाड़ी बता दो और रविंद्र वाली गाड़ी दो ना, गाड़ी तो होगी तुम्हारे पास एक्स्ट्रा, तो ग्राउंड वाली चलाओ फिर। तो भाई गाड़ी नहीं हो पा रही तो ऐसे क्या कह रहे।
Suppose we are a given database of an object and the parting method construct k partitions of data. Each partition will represent a cluster and k less than equal to n. K less than equal to n. It means that it will classify the data into k group which satisfy the following requirements. Each group contains at least one object. Each object must belong to exactly one group. Points to remember. For a given number of partitions, say k, the parting method will create an initialized partition. Then it uses the iterative relocation technique to improve the parting by moving objects from one group to another group. The hierarchical method. In this method, create a hierarchical decomposition of a given set of data objects. We can classify the hierarchical method on the basis of how the hierarchical documentation is formed. There are two approaches here. एक होता है एगोलोमेट्रिक अप्रोच, एक होता है डाविंची अप्रोच. Agglomeratic approach. This approach is also known as the bottom-up approach. In this, we start with each object forming a separate group. It keeps on merging the object or group that are closer to one another. It keeps on doing so until all of the group are managed into one or until the termination condition holds. Devising approach. This approach is also known as the top-down approach. In this, we start with all of the objects in the same cluster. In the continuous iteration, a cluster is split up into smaller clusters. It is down until each object in one cluster or the termination condition holds. This method is rich. Once a merging or splitting is done, it can never be undone. Approach to improve the quality of hierarchical clustering. Here are the two approaches that are used to improve the quality of hierarchical clusters. Perform careful analysis of the object linkage at each hierarchical parting. Integrate the hierarchical agglomeration by first using a hierarchical agglomeration algorithm to group object into microcluster and then performing the microclustering on the microclusters. Density based method. Density based method क्या होता है? This method is used based on the notation of density base idea is to continue growing the given clustering as long as the density in the neighborhood exceeds some threshold. For each data point within a given cluster, the radius of a given cluster has to contain at least a minimum number of points. एक होता है ग्रिड बेस्ड मेथड। ग्रिड बेस्ड मेथड क्या होता है? In this, the object together from a grid, the object space is quantized into finite number of calls that form a grid structure. Advantage of grid. The major advantage of this method is fast processing time. It is dependent only on the number of cells in each dimension in the quantized space. Module based methods. In this method, a module is hypothesized for each cluster to find the best fit of the data for a given module. This method locates the cluster by the clustering the density functions. It reflects the spectral distribution of the data points. This method also provides a way of automative। एक मिनट बेटा चालू रखना। हेलो, हाँ, हम कहाँ थे? इसमें मॉडल बेस्ड मेथड्स की जब हम बात करते हैं तो मॉड्यूल बेस्ड मेथड्स के अंदर होता क्या है? In this method, a module is hypothesized for each cluster to find the best fit of data for a given module. This method locates the clusters by the clustering the density function. It reflects the spectral distribution of the data points. This method also provides a way to automatically determine the number of clusters based on the standard statistics, taking outlier or noise into account. It therefore yet robust clustering methods. Constraint based methods. Constraint based method क्या होता है? In this method, the clustering is performed by their incorporation of user or application oriented constraints. A constraint refers to the user expectation or the properties of desired clustering result. Constraints provide us with an interactive way of communication with the clustering process. Constraint can be specified by the user or the application requirements. Cluster analysis. Cluster is a group of objects that belong to the same class. In other words, Similar objects are grouped in one cluster and dissimilar objects are grouped in another cluster. इसमें क्लस्टर एनालिसिस के बारे में भी बताता हूँ आपको। इसमें क्लस्टर एनालिसिस के अंदर एक होता है के मीन क्लस्टरिंग। के मीन क्लस्टरिंग इज द मोस्ट कॉमन partition algorithm. K mean reassign each data in the dataset to only one of the new cluster format. A record or data point is assigned to the nearest cluster using a measure of distance or similarity. What is two-way number partitioning? The two-way number partitioning problem is the divide set of number into two subsets. As a result of the dividing process, the subs of number in subset must be an easy equal to possible. The two-way number partitioning problem is NP complete. What is primary and extended partitions? The primary partition is bootable and it contains the operating system of the computer. The extended partition is a partition that is not bootable. Application scenario, we can use it to boot the operating system, establish 1 to 4 primary partitions and install multiple operating system without interfering. एक होता है what is the difference between primary and secondary partitions? The second partition can be created as an extended partitions which can contain all the remaining unpartitioned space on the disk. A primary partition is one that can be used as the system partition. If the disk does not contain a system partition, you can configure the entire disk as a single extended partition. What is the difference between primary partition and logical partition? Logical partition are similar to primary partition. However, while only 4 primary partitions can exist on a single disk, the number of logical partitions that can exist on a disk is unlimited. A logical partition can be formatted and assigned a drive later. What is the type of horizontal partition? Two common types of horizontal partitioning are range and hash partitioning. On the other hand, vertical partitioning allow a table to be partitioned into disjoint set of the columns. Difference between list and range partitions. With list column, a row match a partition if all row variable are identical to the specified value. At most one partition can match the row. With range column, a row match a partition if all row value are less than specified value. The first partition that match now value will be used. Why partition and clustering used? A partition table is a table divided into sections by partitions. Dividing a range table into smaller partitions allow for the improved performance and reduced cost by controlling the amount of data retrieved from a query. Clustering sorted the data based on one or more column in the table. Which partition is best? You will probably want to use GPT when the setting up a drive. It is a more model, robust standard that all computers are moving toward. If you need the compatibility with old system, for example, the ability to boot window of a drive on a computer with a traditional BIOS. What is basic partition type? According to Microsoft, the basic data partition is the equivalent to master boot record. Partition type 0 into 6, 0 into 7, 0 into 8. What is partition by hash? Partition is based on a function of one or more column. The hash partition key in each record. The hash partition examines one or more field of each input record. Record with the same value for all hash key field are assigned to the same processing. दूसरा क्या है? What are all the partition of file? जब हम पर्टिकुलर क्लस्टरिंग माइनिंग की बात करते हैं तो हम ये सारा का सारा लास्ट एक चीज़ और देख लेते हैं, व्हाट इज क्लस्टर इन डेटा माइनिंग, क्या होता है डेटा माइनिंग क्लस्टर्स के बारे में। तो cluster analysis in data mining mean that to find out the group of objects which are similar to each other in the group but are different from the object is in another group. In the process of clustering in data analysis, the sets of data are divided into groups or classes based on the data similarity. What are k-mean clustering methods? क्या होता है k-mean clustering methods? K-mean clustering is a method of vector quantization originally from the signal processing that aim to partition an observations into k cluster in which each observation belong to the cluster with the nearest mean cluster center or cluster centroids serving as a prototype of a cluster. What is parallel partition formula? Using the partition parallelism, the same job would effectively be run simultaneously by several processes, each handling a separate subset or the total data. अब हम चलते हैं नेक्स्ट, कैटेगराइजेशन ऑफ मेजर क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स। मेजर क्लस्टरिंग मेथड्स में हम किस तरीके से कैटेगराइज करते हैं? You will learn about the clustering and its type. Take a look at the different type of clustering methods belong. Density based clustering, DB scan, density based spectral clustering of application with noise. एक होता है ऑप्टिक ordering point to identify the clustering structure. HBS scan, hierarchical density based spectral clustering of application with noise. The hierarchical clustering, fuzzy clustering, partnering clustering, PAM, partitioning around midgauge और ग्रिड बेस्ड क्लस्टरिंग। तो हम वन बाय वन डिस्कस करेंगे। रीड द फुल आर्टिकल टू नो मोर, कि इसके बारे में हम किस तरीके से बात करेंगे, उस चीज़ के बारे में हम देख लेते हैं। क्या categorization of major clustering method, categorization of major clustering methods. इसमें मैंने आपको बताया ये सारे हायरार्किकल, पार्टीशन, डेंसिटी, ग्रिड बेस्ड, मॉड्यूल बेस्ड, कंस्टेंट बेस्ड, ये सारे के सारे क्या होते हैं? मेथड्स होते हैं। इनके अंदर जब हम पर्टिकुलर किसी भी क्लस्टरिंग को प्रोसेस करते हैं, क्लस्टरिंग इज द प्रोसेस ऑफ ग्रुपिंग ए सेट ऑफ इंस्टेंस into a set of subclass that are called as the cluster, and it is also known as the learning by observation, automatic classification, data segmentation, unsupervised learning, etc. दूसरा होता है व्हाट आर द broad three category of clustering techniques. Below are the main clustering method used in the machine learning: patterning clustering, density based clustering, distribution module based clustering. Classification clustering are technique used in data mining to analyze the collected data. Classification is used to label data, while clustering is used to group similar data instances together. एक क्या होता है clustering is the same as the classification in which data is grouped through. Unlike classification, the group are not previously defined in instant. The grouping is achieved by the determining similarity between data according to characteristics found in the real data. The group are called cluster. एक what are classification techniques? Classification techniques कौन कौन से होते हैं? Classification is the technique in which similar data set are classified in one set based on their the characteristics. The classification a classifier or module is made to predict the class level attributes. The basic task of the classification is to forecast the target class for every kind of data. The hierarchical cluster analysis follows three basic steps: calculate the distance, link the cluster, choose a solution by selecting the right number of clusters. K-mean is probably the most well-known clustering algorithm. It's the target in a lot of introductory data. Since the machine learning classes, it is easy to understand the implement in code. What are the two methods of clustering? There are two types of methods: grid based clustering method, stick crew step improved in the grid based clustering algorithm are divide data space into a finite number of cells. How many type of clusterings? The major type of clustering analysis are centroid based, partition clustering, hierarchical based clustering, distribution based clustering, density based clustering, and fuzzy based clustering. What are the major classification of data mining system? One is the characterization, discretization, association, correlation analysis, classification, prediction, and outlier analysis, evaluation analysis. What are the major requirements of clustering? कौन कौन सी होती हैं? एक होता है scalability. We need highly scalable clustering algorithm to deal with the large data set. The ability to deal with different kind of attributes. Algorithm should be capable to be applied on any kind of the data, such as the interval based numerical data, categorical or binary data, which is not part of the category of clustering methods. Hence, the k nearest neighbor method is not a clustering method. What are the five major steps of data pre-processing? Acquire the dataset, improve all the crucial libraries, import the dataset, identify and handling the missing value, encoding the categorical data, splitting the dataset, or feature scaling. Why use clustering for classification? Clustering is an unsupervised machine learning method of identifying and grouping similar data points in larger dataset without concern for the specifying outcome. Clustering, sometimes called the clustering analysis, is used to classify data into structures that are most easily understood and manipulated data. What are द फोर क्लासिफिकेशन मेथड्स, ये सारा का सारा आपका होता है। अब आप लोगों को तो आपका कोई क्वेश्चन